It's a Monday edition of PFT OT, the last Monday before PFT Live returns, and PFT OT actually means PFT OT. For now, it's PFT only because we don't have the morning show. But again, it's just a week away, and when we return to PFT Live, we will know whether or not Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott showed up for Cowboys training camp. The report day is Thursday. They gather in Dallas, and then they travel to Oxnard, California. And it was just a week ago that I first caught wind of the possibility that Ezekiel Elliott won't show up for training camp. Prior to that, everyone thought that, number one, he wasn't going to get a new contract from the Cowboys this year. And number two, he was okay with that. Well, he may not get a new contract, and he may not be okay with it. And since we reported last Monday that he was privately telling people that he's thinking about holding out, it has snowballed to a certain extent. Over the weekend, we reported that Elliott is actually making plans to travel out of the country in lieu of going to training camp, and now Ian Rappaport of the NFL says that Elliott hasn't made a firm decision about whether or not he's going to hold out. Of course, it's all contingent on whether or not progress is made toward a new contract. So if the Cowboys do nothing, it looks like Ezekiel Elliott is going to hold out. If the Cowboys give him a clear indication he's going to get that contract, or talks are moving in that direction, or they've made an appropriate promise, or whatever the case may be, then he shows up. So this is all very tenuous right now, and it appears that the battle lines have been drawn. Without an indication he's going to get that financial reward entering year 4 of his career, it looks like Ezekiel Elliott will not be showing up for the start of the Dallas Cowboys training camp. Another guy who may or may not show up for the start of training camp is a player entering year 4 of his career of a 4-year contract. Remember, Zeke has 5, but Chris Jones, the Chiefs defensive end who plays a lot of defensive tackle, has a 4-year deal. He was a second-round pick back in 2016, and now the question is, will he continue to stay away from anything and everything related to preparation for the season? He skipped the voluntary offseason program. He skipped the mandatory minicamp. I'm told that no decisions have been made about whether or not he's going to show up for camp. All options are being considered. It won't surprise me if he holds out. An important wrinkle to keep in mind as it relates to Jones is that August 6th deadline. We spoke about that deadline last week in relation to Elliott, and my point is it doesn't matter to Ezekiel Elliott if he fails to show up by August 6th and then in turn fails to get a year of credit toward free agency, because he's more than a year away from free agency. He's got 2 years left on his contract. He'd be making a stand to get paid, and whether or not he picks up a year of credit toward free agency wouldn't matter to him, just like it didn't matter to Aaron Donald the last 2 years, or it didn't matter to Darrelle Revis, Chris Johnson, and others. Now, for Chris Jones, he's in the last year of his contract. He needs that 4th year of service to be eligible for free agency next year. But here's the thing to keep in mind. If Chris Jones doesn't show up by August 6th, what that means is, as long as he shows up by the Tuesday after Week 10, he gets credit for the contract, but he doesn't have 4 years of service. He would be eligible not for unrestricted free agency, but for restricted free agency. And what the Chiefs could do at that point is keep him with the relatively low restricted free agency tender, but that would expose him to that opportunity to sign an offer sheet with another team. And if the Chiefs don't match, the Chiefs would only get 1 first-round draft pick as compensation. Used to be the maximum tender for restricted free agency was a first-round pick and a third-round pick. Now, the maximum is just 1 first-round pick. So would the Chiefs take that chance, even though they could, if Chris Jones doesn't show up by August 6th? Would they use the RFA tender next year? My gut tells me they probably wouldn't, and they would still use the franchise tag, which can be used for a restricted free agent. So it'd be in the same spot that he's going to be in if he does show up by August 6th. So let's not put too much stock into August 6th as it relates to Jones or Elliott or anyone else who may hold out, because ultimately this is about withholding services to get that contract. And the best way to get a team's attention, if you're good enough to be viewed as a guy that the team really needs, is to stay away until the team blinks and realizes it's time to make the player a more higher paid member of the organization. In Atlanta, Julio Jones has shown up. He didn't hold out. They've started training camp, but he's yet to get the new contract that he says he was promised by owner Arthur Blank. And look, once you show up, it's a lot harder to exert leverage on the team. Now, you can walk out of camp, but the consequences can become very, very dire if the team sends a 5-day letter and the team ultimately decides to put you on the reserve left squad list, which shuts you down for the whole year. It is rare that a guy shows up and then leaves. I don't rule that out with Julio Jones, but here's the more likely scenario. And someone who's very plugged in with the way these things work told me this earlier today. Because Julio Jones got a new contract last year from the Falcons on July 26, the Falcons are likely unable to give Jones the kind of contract that he wants now until the one-year anniversary of that last deal. It gets very complicated, convoluted, beyond my understanding of the way the rules work. But the case seems to be, and there are other people around the league who think this, that the Falcons and Julio Jones have a deal in place, and it's just a matter of waiting for that one-year anniversary of the last contract to come and go before they do the deal that has been done on a wink-nod basis behind the scenes to coax Julio Jones to show up for training camp. Of course, whether or not there's any merit to that, we'll find out later this week. It's now the 22nd of July. The 26th is coming up on Friday. If that new deal is announced, if it's signed, maybe we can wonder even more strongly whether or not that deal was in place when he showed up for the start of training camp. When the Chiefs start training camp, receiver Tyreek Hill will be there. We know that from Friday's decision by the league to not suspend him at all, not to even discipline him in any way for the various potential violations of the personal conduct policy. But that's not the end of it as it relates to Hill's future with the Chiefs. Unrelated to whether or not he'll be disciplined, suspended, whatever. And again, for now, the answer is he won't be. With that door open for the possibility of additional evidence not available to the NFL coming to light at some point down the road. But let's assume nothing ever comes of it. As it relates to Tyreek Hill's contract, there's still a chance that he won't be a member of the team over the long term. And here's why. They already started negotiating a deal. That happened before the off-field incident kind of took center stage for the Chiefs' offseason program. But before things really hit full boil, Jay Glazer of Fox, who also writes a weekly mailbag column for The Athletic, he pointed out he had heard some trade rumblings at the outset of free agency about Tyreek Hill. Now, if it's not related to what possibly was coming down the pipeline for Tyreek Hill, that means that it may have arisen from the financial demands that were being made on Hill's behalf. And you can make the argument the guy's worth $20 million a year or more. But when you're the Chiefs and you have to pay guys like Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones and other great players who are either on the team or will be on the team in the future, you have to make some tough decisions. And with Mecole Hardman there, drafted in round 2 out of Georgia, and ostensibly at the time he was picked, the replacement for Tyreek Hill in the short term, maybe Hardman's the long-term replacement. And Hardman gives the Chiefs the opportunity to really study what he can do. And he's drawn some favorable comparisons to guys like Hill and Deshaun Jackson from Chiefs coach Andy Reid. If Hardman shows the kind of flashes that we saw from Tyreek Hill his rookie year, because remember, Hill didn't explode as a rookie. We saw some great things in special teams, but we didn't see him as that kind of contributor he's been in 2017 and 2018 for the Chiefs offensively. If we see enough flashes from Hardman, it allows the Chiefs to move on from Hill after the season, to do what they did with Dee Ford last year, tag Hill and trade him, and then let Hardman basically take over the Tyreek Hill role, if that's what they choose to do. And keep this in mind. Hill may want $20 million a year. Hardman's under contract for 4 years at a total of less than $5 million. So, look, the business of football is going to be very relevant for the Kansas City Chiefs because we know Patrick Mahomes is going to get his, and it's going to be a record-setting deal. They have to be careful how much money they spend on other players on the roster in order to have enough great players around Mahomes and enough depth to deal with the inevitable injury. So it could be that by the time it's all said and done, the Chiefs decide to tag and trade Hill and make Mecole Hardman the new Tyreek Hill in the Kansas City Chiefs offense. The New York Giants had the move of the offseason with the stunning, but not really all that shocking trade of Odell Beckham Jr. to the Cleveland Browns. And Odell Beckham, in a lengthy interview with GQ, makes it clear that he wanted out of New York. We already knew that. But he also says he felt disrespected when the trade went down. And I can understand that, okay, he wanted out, but he didn't like the fact that he didn't get a phone call ahead of time, and he really didn't have any say in where he was going to be traded. And you look at what happened to Antonio Brown. He basically was able to veto a possible trade to the Bills, handpick a trade to the Raiders, get a raise along the way. And it could be that Beckham feels miffed that he wasn't included more in the process. But the bottom line is he wanted out, and he got out. And that's what Beckham should be focusing on. And look, there's going to be so much time spent in the coming weeks and months focusing on what the Giants are without Beckham and what Beckham is without the Giants and whether or not Beckham should have wanted out, whether or not the Giants should have kept him. I think everybody involved would be best served by just moving on. And I don't know why Beckham continues to talk about the Giants. And I feel like Beckham, on one hand, doesn't like it when everybody focuses on him and talks about him. But then on the other hand, he doesn't realize that by doing lengthy interviews with publications like GQ, he gives people more things to talk about. At some point, he'll understand the connection between the things he says and does and the reaction that those things generate. And he's always embraced that kind of fame and notoriety throughout his career. And here we are. He's in season number 6 now. He doesn't quite seem to realize the connection between the attention that he attracts, that he seems to covet, and the negative aspect of getting that kind of attention, the criticism that goes along with it. And you just can't have it both ways. You can't have that, hey, everybody look at me personality, and then get offended when people look and don't like what they see or hear. You may be liking what you see and hear coming out of the other New York team this season. The Jets could be a lot better. Their quarterback, Sam Darnold, entering year 2 of his career, says the Jets are in line to win a lot more games this year. Now, relative to what they did last year, that may not be enough to get to the postseason. But I've been a firm believer. Between the Jets and the Bills, one of those two teams is going to rise up and potentially contend for a wild card berth and maybe, just maybe, disrupt the Patriots' stranglehold on the AFC East. Although I don't believe that's going to happen. What I think will happen is either the Jets or the Bills will get in that neighborhood of 7, 8, 9 games and maybe in mid-December be in position where if they get hot down the stretch, they could steal the 6th seed or the 5 seed in the AFC. It's not going to be easy to do. And I think that the real question is who from the Jets, Bills, and Dolphins is going to get the quarterback position in the right hands so that when Tom Brady retires, if he ever retires, one of those other 3 teams is really going to be able to make a run at the New England Patriots. And I think this is the year that we start to see which of those 3 teams may be ready to eventually challenge the Patriots, whenever that may be. And that's what's fascinating. At some point in the next 2, 3, 4 years, maybe not quite that long, we're going to see Bill Belichick with a new quarterback taking on one of these other quarterbacks, and chances are one of these guys, whether it's Darnold with the Jets, Josh Allen with the Bills, or Josh Rosen with the Dolphins, or whoever the Dolphins may get after this season, one of those guys is going to become a franchise quarterback, and they're not going to be easy for the Patriots to beat, especially if the Patriots don't have Tom Brady. All right, one last topic for today's PFT OT, and this is something we've been talking about throughout the offseason because Chicago Bears continue to have a clown show at kicker, all due respect. Sorry, but it's true. And the revolving door may continue to spin. And I've mentioned this before on the PFT PM podcast. You have to look at the way the offseason continues to unfold. And once we get to training camp and the preseason, there are kicking competitions in other cities. And nobody's going to carry more than one kicker. Well, eventually somebody's going to cut a kicker, and the Bears are going to say, this could be our guy. And here's the problem for the Bears, and this is one of the downsides of being the team that plays in the first game of the regular season on September 5. The rosters don't have to cut from 90 to 53 until August 30. And every team out there that has a kicking competition may be inclined to hold on to that other kicker as long as possible because there's a chance the Bears are going to call and say, hey, if you know which guy you're keeping, maybe we'll give you a conditional 7th or 6th round pick for the other guy. And if ultimately all those other teams with kicking competitions hold their guys until August 30, there isn't a whole lot of time for the Bears to bring guys in, figure out who the winner is, get that guy ready to go for a season opening game on NBC with a ton of pressure, and it's going to be a never-ending story. I mean, the Bears have everything else taken care of. Other than the fact that Vic Fangio left and has been replaced by Chuck Pagano as defensive coordinator. There's really no other big story with the Bears. The big story is who the hell is the kicker going to be? And whoever that kicker is, week 1, Thursday night, had better be ready to withstand a ton of scrutiny because he's going to feel all of it on his shoulders when it's time to kick. And it could be the guy who kicks for the Bears this year is a guy who doesn't even know he's going to join the Bears until Monday or Tuesday before that Thursday night game. Either way, it is going to be a challenge, an extra challenge, over and above the pressure that a kicker already feels to be the kicker for the Chicago Bears in 2019. That's it for this Monday edition of PFTOT. A little programming note. We will have editions of PFTOT Tuesday, Thursday, Friday this week. Other video content at ProFootballTalk.com, episodes of PFTPM, and it's all leading up to the triumphant or otherwise return of PFT Live next Monday morning. Sims will be back if he can be located. I will be back as long as I don't stray too far from headquarters, and we'll be off and running, getting you ready for the arrival of the 2019 football season. Have a great day, and we'll see you back here again tomorrow.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.